guys, and welcome to another history for United States history and government. Specifically targeted for the New York State regents, but obviously you can use this for many different classes wherever you are. So we're going to take some time today to kind of go over kind of the concepts of early federal republic. It's not huge on the test, but there's always multiple choice on it, and we certainly want you to be prepared for anything that comes down the Regents Road. So really, the period of history we're talking about is really the beginning of the United States constitutional government that we know of today. So we're going to go back to George. And remember, Washington is president really until, 1787, 1788, when the Constitutional Convention is over. The Constitutional Convention, which revised and then threw out the Articles of Confederation, is kind of, starting point one. So although the country has its foundations in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence and then the passage of the Articles of Confederation, it's 1787 really that we're starting off in. And the early Federal Republic period, I guess, kind of goes till Andrew Jackson, so it's like 1824, but we're not going to be really historical about all the dates and trying to get everything in, but rather conceptually going over the concepts. So here we go. The first concept is Schwarzenegger, baby. That's right, I said it, Schwarzenegger, the governor of California. And the reason why I say Schwarzenegger's name, because that's the visualization I would like you to use to remember the concept for the early Federal Republic. And what would it be? It wouldn't be weak, would it? No, it would be strong or strengthening. And a matter of fact, we can take the three major historical figures that strengthen the federal government, and if we just kind of slap Happy Schwarzenegger as the middle name, we're going to have the answers for three Regents questions. So we'll take you through those three characters, and then we'll see if we have time to throw in Jefferson for some fun. So the three characters are George Schwarzenegger Washington, Alexander Schwarzenegger Hamilton, and John Schwarzenegger Marshall. So why don't we take Marshall first? John Marshall is the first Chief Justice of the United States, and he's responsible for strengthening the federal government's role through judicial review in the Supreme Court. So again, it's John Schwarzenegger Marshall. And the three court cases that kind of come up under his seatbelt would be Marbury versus Madison, which is uno numero uno, something like that. It's really your first court case, and we don't have to get into the midnight judges and the reason why they're reviewing something that occurred under the Adams administration. The idea is that they are reviewing it. I think of judicial review almost like steroids self-inflicted by the court. The court does not have the power of judicial review in the original Constitution. So it's not part of our written philosophy or written Constitution, but rather the unwritten Constitution. It's kind of like they said, why don't we give ourselves some power? And everybody else kind of said, I guess they did it, and we're going to keep doing it. So judicial review is a strengthening of the role of the national government. We now have a little bit more power. The other two court cases are more specific and targeted towards strengthening the words of the Constitution to give the federal government power. Checking my time. And those court cases are Mcculloch versus Maryland, Mcculloch versus Maryland, and Gibbons versus Ogden. So we're just going to take a moment to explain those two court cases that pop up on the exam every once in a while. And again, these are strength cases. Also the idea of strength to the federal government. My camera went on demo mode and now it's really weird, so I'm just going to touch a button. I'm still here. So let's go through those two court cases. Mcculloch versus Maryland. I see this, first I'll give you the analogy. Maybe I should do the analogy second, but I'm going to do it first. If you think of federalism, and I'm looking for a piece of paper. I don't have a lot of paper around here. But in class, what we would always do is we would just kind of grab a piece of paper and we would label it as power, and federalism is the division of power between the federal government and the states' governments. And under the Articles, that was messed up. Remember, the states had too much power and the feds didn't have enough. Well, now we're going to give the feds more power using the Constitution. So if you see federalism kind of like a circle cut in half with fed power on one side and state power on the other side, what we're about to do is strengthen that federal side, make it larger in a sense. Basically, it's kind of the testing of the relationship in federalism. So in Mcculloch versus Maryland, I've always seen this as a child versus the parent. First of all, it has to do with the National Bank, Alexander Hamilton's baby. We're going to get to that in a second, why he's a Schwarzenegger. He's our economic mojo man. And he started the National Bank as a way to really cure the nation's debt system and control the economy to a certain degree. So when he went to Congress and he said, dude, need a national bank, and Congress, which was Federalist too, I should have explained that. These are Federalists of the Federalist Party. They believe in federal power, strength. Nevertheless, Congress says, well, we don't have the power to do that. And Hamilton says, you should read the Constitution. So they turn around and they read the Constitution and they see the magic elastic clause. Say it with me, children. Elastic clause. Congress shall make all laws necessary and proper. Say it with me again. Congress shall make all laws necessary and proper. I messed it up. And that's an enormous, powerful kind of formula. Because what it basically says is, if you watch the Bill of Rights lecture, we kick a chair to remember that anything not in the Constitution is reserved for the states. Well, it would seem like banks would fall under that category. And in this court case, Maryland definitely thinks that banks fall in the 10th Amendment under their jurisdiction. But what Congress does under Hamilton's direction is they create a national bank using the elastic clause. They think it's necessary, so they create it. And then it plops down in Maryland. And Maryland's like, yo, we don't want you here. So Maryland begins to tax the national bank to run them out of Dodge. This isn't kind of akin to if you went home and were like, Mom, get off the couch. You need to go clean my room and give me $20. That's not the way the relationship is supposed to work. The child, the state, in the relationship of federalism is trying to overpower the parent, the daddy. Who's your daddy? The federal government. And what Marshall says in Mcculloch versus Maryland is, no, you can't tax the national bank. And this gives really force to, number one, the elastic clause, necessary. This gives Congress the ability, the federal government the ability to do more than they thought they could. I have to go faster. But it also gives power to the supremacy clause, the part of the Constitution that says the Constitution is the law of the land. And now we have a little bit of force in that. Gibbons versus Ogden is another court case where the federal government is arguing about power over regulating waterways. And again, Marshall says interstate commerce clause and supremacy clause. The interstate commerce clause gives the federal government the ability to regulate interstate travel. Now, rivers. Now, maybe more. Again, federal power. So really quickly, why is Washington, that's Marshall, right? Why is Hamilton a Schwarzenegger? We've already gone over that. He's the father of the National Bank. He's a powerhouse economically, the first Secretary of Treasury, and sometimes that question pops up. You know, Momo Hamilton, but remember Schwarzenegger. Washington's really the one that we want to pay attention to. He's on the test more often than not. Number one, he kicks, Whiskey Rebellion. In class, we kind of do this and we all go, oh, Whiskey Rebellion. This is where we've passed the first tax, federal tax, sales tax in the nation, and Hamilton and Washington went after whiskey. We don't have to go into why they went to whiskey and not rum, but whiskey is primarily a poor man's drink. And in the Appalachian Mountains of Pennsylvania, where they brew the whiskey, they certainly weren't thrilled to see these federal tax collectors coming up the mountainside. So kind of in the spirit of Shays' Rebellion, feeling that they're not really getting represented in Washington, they tar and feather the bastages. I think I shouldn't have said that. But nevertheless, they do. Not a fun experience. And now we have an army. We have Washington. So unlike Shays' Rebellion, where we get on the phone and no one's there, they get on the phone and someone's there, and they kick their arse. And this gives really kind of credence to the power of the federal government. We need to go really quickly in the next 50 seconds as my camera goes to go off again. The farewell address, and we're going to, I guess, save Jefferson or Louisiana Purchase for another lecture. But the farewell address is most often on the test. And in class we do 3 body motions. I only have about 30 seconds, so here we go. I always point to the door and shake my head. This is the idea of stay away from the rest of the world. Make sure you know that Washington sets down isolationism as kind of credence and unwritten policy. And we're the 98-pound weakling. It's in our best interest to stay away from the world. The other one is he goes, oh, and he looks on either side of him. This is fear the two-party system. The Feds and the anti-Feds, Jefferson's anti-Republicans, were together for Washington in the cabinet. He fears that they will now go their separate ways and they won't think of what's best for the country. And the last one is no two terms. Remember that Washington served only 2 terms and stepped down out of grace, and that is unwritten constitution until FDR breaks that rule. And the 22nd Amendment. See you when